My son and I spent a night at a motel. I couldn't believe what was in our room. "It's not working," my son said, emerging from the adjoining room. "I don't like it here." I sighed, patting the couch. I already knew it was going to be a long night. My son had spent almost 3 hours pacing in and out of the bedroom, unable to fall asleep. I couldn't blame him, of course. The implications of the divorce had undoubtedly trickled down far enough, and this was his way of letting me know. "It's only for a couple of days," I said, ruffling his hair, "then we'll go to Grandma's." He nodded, a forlorn expression on his face. "Is Dad going to be at Grandma's too?" I squeezed his hand in mine. "No. Only us." I could see it going round and round in his mind and couldn't help feeling a pang of guilt. There was no way I could have known my ex-husband was going to turn up on the doorstep of our motel room that morning, of all places. I knew I shouldn't have let him in. What was supposed to be a simple goodbye transformed into yet another row, until he'd had enough and stormed out. "Tell you what," I said, trying to keep my inner turmoil under wraps, "how about you go get into bed and I'll come read you a bedtime story, whichever one you'd like." I perched on the edge of the couch, ready to make good on my end of the deal, but my son's expression remained shrouded. "I don't want to sleep in that room," he muttered. "I don't like it there." "Why?" I asked. "What's wrong with it?" He took a while to answer, his eyes dancing across the small TV screen in the corner of the room. I think there's someone in there." I stared at him, my skin prickling. How could there be anyone in there? The motel room only had one entrance, and we were on the second floor. What do you mean?" I said, trying my best to keep my voice steady. "Why do you think so?" He wouldn't meet my gaze, but I could see his little hands working overtime, molding strange and intricate shapes with his fingers. I heard someone breathing. My stomach lurched. I mean, I knew no one was really in the room. But what if someone was? What if my ex-husband had somehow managed to sneak in and was hiding in the bedroom, waiting for us to go to sleep, waiting to take back his son? I shook my head free of the thought. Ridiculous. "Shall we go have a look?" I got up and extended my hand. "Together?" He seemed hesitant at first, his eyes darting over to the crack in the door and back to the TV, but eventually nodded and slid his hand into mine. There was nothing in the room. Nothing at all. I left my son standing in the doorway and checked under the bed, in the closet, even behind the curtains, but there was not a single thing amiss. "See? It's empty?" He didn't seem convinced. "It won't work with the lights on and you here, Mom." Of course, it wouldn't. "Well, do you want to sleep in my bed?" I said, kneeling down in front of him, "or on the couch?" His face lit up. "On the couch." "Can I keep watching TV?" Well, how could I say no? All it took was 20 minutes of some obscure reality show, and my son was completely out of it. I sat next to him, stroking his back and every so often glancing towards his bedroom. I knew he'd be far more comfortable in bed, but I couldn't bring myself to carry him there. I mean, of course I knew there was no real danger, but I felt wary of it all the same. What if my son knew something I didn't? Tucking him in the best I could, I left him on the couch and got into my own bed. Tomorrow would be better, I told myself. We'd go shopping, watch movies, do anything to take our minds off the events of the past few months. It was finally over. Before we knew it, we'd be on our way to my mother's house in the neighboring city. We'd be safe there. A soft nudge into my back made my blood run cold. I stared up at the ceiling, fear sizzling through my body like electricity. Okay, I thought. Okay, it was only my imagination. Another nudge. Harder this time. I shot out of bed, my heart hatching out of my throat. Every cell in my body felt like it was on fire. I flipped on the light switch and inspected the mattress, my stomach churning. What the bloody hell was that? The mattress looked clean and well, ordinary. Not a single lump in sight. I inspected the clothes I was wearing as well, wondering if perhaps what I'd felt was a missed tag or loose thread, but found nothing. After about 10 minutes I began feeling better. I mean, I hadn't slept properly in 2-3 weeks? My sanity was obviously crumbling under all the pressure. Stress-induced hallucinations are a thing, right? Especially in a strange motel room like this. It wasn't just likely, no, this was to be expected. But as soon as I turned out the lights and settled down, a soft nudge into the small of my back sent me over the edge again. I grit my teeth and did my best to ignore it, beads of sweat springing out on my temples. It was only a figment of my imagination, only a figment of. That's when the mattress started shifting. It protruded at awkward angles, slowly but surely digging into my back, as whatever was inside attempted to turn over, change positions, or I didn't have time to speculate. Slick with sweat, I kicked the covers away and fell to the floor. An overwhelming smell of blood seemed to permeate the room. I retched. Snapping the light switch on, I grabbed the phone and dialed for the front desk. I wasn't entirely sure what I was doing. What was I even going to say? Excuse me, there's something moving in my mattress? Ridiculous. Front desk, a friendly voice came through the speaker. How may I help? Yes, hello, I choked. Listen, there seems to be an issue with the bedding in our room. Could you please send someone up? Silence. Hello? I repeated. The line went dead. I buried my face in my hands, wondering if I was truly losing my mind. I couldn't go downstairs and leave my son, but I couldn't get back into bed either. Oh God, I knew we should have stayed in that 3-star hotel down the road. I knew it. I stared at the mattress, wiping my clammy skin with the hem of my shirt. Imagination or not, I decided, there was no way in hell I was getting back into that bed. I fell asleep on the couch next to my son instead. Well, perhaps sleep is an overstatement. I tossed and turned for most of the night, unable to stop peeking at the bed, and promising myself that as soon as the sun rose, we'd pack our bags and leave. Except we didn't. I woke up to several uniformed men patrolling the room. What the hell? I sat up, my son still sleeping soundly in my arms. Yeah, the front desk received an anonymous call last night, one man said to another, sent a maid up to check. She said no one answered the door, but the smell was putrid when she got in. Found this. He patted the mattress with one hand, before lifting it onto its side. I gasped. A large tear ran down the bottom. Same with the bed in the other room. Another officer came out of the room behind us, lugging my son's mattress, bottom is torn to shreds. Find out who the last visitors were, one of the men was saying into the phone, check all the surveillance cameras. I'll need a copy of the tape. I watched them, dumbfounded. What were the police doing in our room? Why did they need to know who the last visitors were? There hadn't been anyone here, aside from my son and my ex-husband. Had we done anything wrong? They excavated the mattresses right in front of me, ripping the foam innards away until the room was covered in specks of white dust. The officers never stopped talking, using terms like asphyxiation and homicide, but I barely heard them. All I could focus on were the contents. My body. And my son's. Every Halloween the girl in the mask wants candy and nobody knows where she comes from. She comes with a mask with no face and knocks on our doors, loudly uttering the quintessential Halloween phrase, trick or treat. And you've got to hand her candy. If you don't, you die. Nobody knows where she comes from or where she goes. She's always been here, part of the community as long as anyone can remember, and she'll be here long after. There are theories and where she comes and goes and what she is, but none have ever been proved to be true. There's a fine line between bravery and stupidity, and occasionally you'll have the daredevil teens or the newbie homeowner who wants to know and tries to follow her. Usually they come back, memory erased from the night. Or maybe they speak of something horrible beneath the mask, a face like no other. An image so savage and raw it was enough to drive the insane sane, and the sane insane. A couple years ago Danforth David's man moved in. He was a cruel man who would take any opportunity given to inflict the most evil of things on people. He would call the police on neighbors having a simple drink or kids having fun. That year, that Halloween, the girl in the mask with no face paid us all a visit, as usual. Danforth didn't listen to our warnings on the girl, though it wasn't like we warned him well, if you know what I mean. Danforth lived across the street, and when the girl knocked on my door, screaming trick or treat, I opened the door, and across the street I saw Danforth, arms crossed, a Bible in his hand. He was grunting menacingly and trying to lecture passers-by on the demons of Halloween and that we were inviting devils into our home. I handed the girl, who oddly never held a bag, a few packets of candy. She giggled and thanked me, just like any other child. "Hey," I began, pointing at the now screaming Danforth. "I heard that man gives really good candy. You should go over there." "Really?" the girl gasped. If she had a face behind her mask, her eyes would have been wide. "That's awesome." I smiled and nodded. The girl wouldn't kill him. It would take more than a simple refusal to kill. At first, there were stages to the effects of the girl. I watched nervously, and the girl in the mask skipped over to my neighbor, an elderly old woman who lovingly handed over 6 packets of candy. I'd heard she tried to follow the girl to wherever she came from many years ago, and since then was terrified of what she had seen. The girl thanked her loudly and finally skipped over to Danforth. It was as if the whole neighborhood collectively held their breath then. We all knew what happened to those who refused the girl candy, nothing too life-threatening, and we all wanted Danforth's crimes against the community to be paid for. "Trick or treat," the girl laughed. Even across the street her voice was joyful and loud. Danforth looked at her, quite puzzled. He'd been quite loud in his preaching against the Halloween joy and was quite stunned when the girl seemed to completely ignore him and loudly scream, now twice, "Trick or treat," at him. "Now listen here, young lady," Danforth began. "Halloween is a creation of evil, and any pure soul must know that trick or treat," the girl once again exclaimed, ignored Danforth's lecture. When Danforth did nothing but continue, the girl skipped away, happy as before, to the next house over. Danforth started to go back to preaching. After a few lines he stopped. All eyes were really on him now. This wouldn't be something to miss. He began to cough now, and immediately we saw it, blood. The man coughed again, and more blood erupted, and now, not just blood but needles. He coughed more violently, and more needles sprang from his throat, scratching him and falling on the floor. It lasted about a minute until he stopped, and then he angrily charged forward, running at the girl. Oh no. He grabbed her by the neck and shook her, violently screaming, "What have you done to me?" and a flurry of curses and prophetic condemnation. The girl didn't respond, only staring up at him with the mask of no face. Danforth shook her more violently, somehow more than before, and asked, "What the devil have you done to me? Take that mask off, young lady, a good girl like." And then he tore off the mask and screamed. I looked away, of course, and to my knowledge, so did anyone else who was watching. I looked into my hands and the bowl of candy I was holding. I heard screaming like I had never seen before, screams that went on until the screams stopped, and I, although gingerly, peered back outside. Danforth was on his knees now, a blank look on his face. He stared into the torn-off mask, now held in his hands. He remained silent, unmoving, and then he collapsed. The girl hopped and skipped away. She had collected her fill for the night. And though old, mean Danforth had torn her mask away, another had emerged, covering her face as the moonlight shone above. She skipped her way off into the distance as we watched, and as she vanished we breathed a sigh of relief. When I first moved there 6 years ago, I thought it was an elaborate prank. Unfriendly urban legend to spook to kids. I have too. When the girl actually did come, I thought it was part of the prank and fortunately, gave her candy. After Halloween I asked who had been the cheerful little girl that aligned perfectly with the legend, and to my surprise they all stayed true to their story. Some of the older people shared stories about the girl terrible tales, and gradually, I was left with no choice but to accept that things were just that way. But before I saw what happened to Danforth, there was always a tinge of doubt in my head. After Danforth, though, did I realize it really was true. Danforth, of course, regained consciousness the next day. He picked himself off the street and returned to his house, confused and still terrified. He made himself small and didn't stop bothering people. At first. The moment Christmas hit, Danforth returned to his old and devilish ways of ringing up the cops whenever some poor soul was too loud for his liking, or if the music they were playing was pissing him off in some way. There wasn't much we could do about him. He was rich and held a mighty sway over the local government. As the months passed and Halloween approached, things Danforth began to grow more crazed. We'd thought he'd finally shut up about Halloween and abide by the legend, but no. Now, Danforth was more vocal against the dangers of Halloween. A full month before Halloween and he was already speaking out. And not just him now he had cronies. 2 other Danforth-like copies who echoed anything he said. "We're gonna kill that menace," he shouted, blasting really annoying music as he went door to door, handing out flyers that told us not to feed her candy, claiming that we were giving the devil our souls. "She's going down," one of his like-minded copies echoed. "We're prepared this year," said the other, holding up not 1, but 2 Bibles. "Sure," I murmured, slamming the door in their faces. By now Danforth had heard the legend for himself, and anything he'd choose to do now was entirely going to be his fault. The legend tells us that the first visit is only a warning. Fail to appease the spirit of the girl and you disappear. She takes you with her and you go away, never to return or to be seen again. And there's no escaping her either. I took the kids and me away on vacation a Halloween once. Lame, I know, and she was there, knocking on my hotel door. Trick or treat, and fortunately, I was prepared, handing over a protein bar I'd completely forgotten was in my bag. She looked at it, puzzled, but skipped away and vanished. Nothing bad happened to me, and since that night I was always prepared. Halloween season was really rolling in now, and Danforth and his cronies had begun to take down decorations, much to the cries of innocent children. We couldn't wait until Halloween, then that weirdo would have his word's worth. At last, did Halloween finally roll in. Trick or treat, I heard, as knocks that were far too heavy pounded on the door. I practically leaped over and opened the door, seeing the girl once more, a mask with no face still being worn, although a thin, almost smile had now emerged. "Here you go," I cheered, handing her an especially large grouping of candy. The girl was practically bouncing with joy, and it was clearly not because of the candy. "Why are you so happy today?" "Today I get more treats," she replied, jumping up and down for joy. And now, in a more almost adult tone, "More treats than I've ever had before. More treats that will bring peace and justice back to our community." "What?" I began, but by then, she was off, skipping away, but then being ambushed by Danforth and his cronies. "You devil," he called out, stopping the girl in her tracks. His cronies surrounded her. "I order thee to leave our holy community." One of his cronies began to chant something I was too far away to hear. The other had both Bibles up and was waving them around. It wasn't really very clear. "In the name of all that is good and holy, I banish thee." Danforth growled, reaching for the mask and preparing to rip it off. "I reveal to the Lord the face of a devil, may he destroy you and bring peace to our fine land." I was too captivated to look away as Danforth ripped the mask off the girl's face, revealing her true identity, a face off of nothing. An endless void, and yet there were shapes that didn't quite make sense. I didn't see her face in full, no, just from the sides, and I quickly averted my eyes, fearing the impossible geometric shapes that riddled her face. Danforth's cronies screamed as they saw whatever else was in that void, and they began to run. One of them tripped in the sidewalk and tripped, yet impossibly being thrown backwards, right into Danforth's house, shattering the windows. The other suddenly stopped in place mid-run and I don't really have any words to explain what exactly happened to him. He froze in place and began to float just ever so slightly off the ground. And he went up and up, slowly gaining speed, until he was never seen again. And Danforth? Well, whatever happened to him was clearly worse than the others. He began to throw up now, but not needles, rather packets and packets of candies, all empty. He began to choke, and yet more fell out. The girl reached down on the ground and picked up her mask, putting it back onto her face. Danforth stopped vomited candy wrappers and looked back at the girl, who then placed her arms upon his shoulders and whispered something. Danforth's eyes bulged in horror, and then they were gone. His eyes. They became candy wrappers that fell to the ground, floating away in the wind. The rest of him followed soon after, until he exploded in hundreds of orange and black candy wrappers that drifted away under the gaze of the moon. And the little girl, happy as ever, skipped into the horizon. Now, as I finish typing this up, I hear that familiar sound of a knock on the door and those perfectly timed words, trick or treat. Things are good now, without Danforth. We all pay our dues to the girl in the mask, and not a single soul has been harmed since. So if you ever see a little girl in a mask that had no face, do give her some candy. She really does appreciate it. My girlfriend was up unusually early this morning. I wish I never found out why. I'm going to take out the trash, my girlfriend Monica announced as soon as I entered the kitchen that morning. I hadn't expected to see her up this early. Certainly not after how late she must have gotten home last night. After spending Friday nights bar hopping with friends, Monica usually slept in until lunch. Okay, honey, I said, without particular interest, thanks. Grabbing the cereal box from the counter and plopping down on one of the kitchen chairs, I wondered if she had returned home earlier the previous night and I'd simply missed it. I mean, I normally woke up as soon as I heard the key turning in the lock, but perhaps that night she'd been particularly quiet? Or maybe she'd stayed with one of her friends. How was your night? I asked, as soon as I heard the front door click shut. What time did you get home? Silence. I raised my head from my bowl, waiting for her to emerge from around the corner, but the corridor was empty. Honey? I tried again, my voice saturated with uncertainty. Monica appeared in the doorway, her expression unreadable. She didn't look disoriented or drunk, but she didn't seem quite right either. Her hands were fidgety, and her eyes wouldn't meet mine. Monica? I grunted, trying to tame the lump in my throat. What's the matter? She took a deep breath and parted her lips, as though she was going to speak, but then hunched her shoulders and shook her head. I need to take out the trash, she said. I gawked at her, dumbfounded. But, you just did? She shook her head and glided towards the trash can cabinet, opening it and producing another bag from within. Then, just like the previous time, she turned on her heel and disappeared from the kitchen. Needless to say, the silent treatment was unlike Monica. Had something happened during her night out? Had I done anything to upset her? And where were all these bags coming from? As soon as I heard the front door shut, I leapt out of my seat and threw the cabinet open, expecting to. Well, I'm not entirely sure what I was expecting. Either way, it was empty. What's going on? I asked, when she returned 5 minutes later, the same empty look in her eyes. Do you want to talk about it? She looked dubious. Monica? Okay, she said, but first, let me take out the trash. My stomach lurched as she flung the cabinet open again, pulling out yet another garbage bag. What the hell? I began, subconsciously pinching my arm, as if to ensure I wasn't dreaming. What are all these bags? But she wasn't listening, instead turning her back to me and retreating the same way she had come. A chill crawled up my spine. What the hell was going on? I could have sworn the cabinet had been empty only a few moments ago. Where had all these bags come from, and why wasn't she taking them out all at once? Shutting the front door behind me as meticulously as I could, I crept down the hallway leading to the stairwell. I needed to investigate. Monica had never willingly taken out the trash before. She said the garbage chute gave her the creeps. Our apartment was on the 6th floor, so there was no way she was going down all those flights of stairs for a single bag of garbage. The door to the garbage chute at the end of the hallway was ajar, and I could hear the faint wail of metal as it was pulled open. I swallowed, suddenly at a loss for what to do. I mean, wouldn't it be weird if she found me just standing there? And what exactly was I planning to say? I listened in, my skin prickling in anticipation and my heart thudding in my chest. Oh, what was I getting so worked up for? It was only Monica, for God's sake. She'd probably had a falling out with one of her friends, or maybe I was snoring again and she couldn't get to sleep. I'll just go in, and but what I saw when I opened the door will remain with me for the rest of my life. Monica was sitting on the door of the chute, her legs already swallowed by the darkness within. Slowly but surely, she was edging her body into it, her palms clammy against the metallic finish. She turned her head at the sound of the door opening, and for a brief moment her eyes lit up with recognition. Monica! I cried out, dashing towards the chute, my heart practically leaping out of my chest. What are you, Dash? But it was too late. Startled by my voice, or by my presence, she let go and disappeared into the chute, a raspy wail reverberating against the steel. Thud. I wanted to scream, but it was as though I'd suddenly gone mute. Fear sizzled through me like electricity as I flew down the stairs to the manager's office. Give me the key to the trash room, I demanded breathlessly. My girlfriend is inside. He looked at me over the tops of his glasses, as though questioning my state of mind. That's impossible, he retorted. I have the only key. Tears were flowing freely down my cheeks and my clothes were damp with sweat. I must have looked a downright sight, but I didn't care. She fell into the chute, I sobbed, grabbing the edge of his desk for support, from the 6th floor. Everything happened quickly after that. An ambulance was called, as were the police. At first they were hesitant to tell me what they'd found. They kept insisting I sit down and have some water, throwing leaflets about therapy and mental well-being into my lap. Please, just tell me, just tell me. I kept repeating, but nobody was listening. Hours seemed to pass by without a single word of affirmation or any information needed to piece the events of the morning together. The ambulance left within about 20 minutes of arrival and left the police to take care of it. I couldn't understand it. I mean, even if Monica was badly hurt, she'd still need to be looked at the hospital. So, why had they left? Eventually, an uneasy-looking officer took a seat next to me. Son, he began slowly, studying my reaction, your girlfriend is gone. I buried my face in my hands. Of course, she was. She'd jumped down the fucking chute, plummeting God knows how many feet. But your story isn't quite adding up, he continued, his eyes narrowing. You said she'd fallen into the chute, but... He took a deep breath, his forehead creasing. But we found her, well, parts of her, inside a garbage bag. My blood ran cold. It was like I could no longer understand what he was saying. His mouth was moving, but the sounds were jumbled and wouldn't make sense. Inside a garbage bag. What the hell was that supposed to mean? He explained that the garbage bag had been there for at least several hours before the police were called. He said that there was no doubt that its contents belonged to Monica. He asked whether I had any idea what happened. Then, in a much softer tone, he added that I'd be expected to come in for questioning. When I finally returned to my apartment that morning, all I wanted to do was fall into bed and go to sleep, praying I'd wake up to discover that all this had been nothing but a bad dream. But as soon as I entered the bedroom, the front door slammed shut. Hello? I called out, my voice meek and croaky. Silence. A newfound sense of dread filled my lungs as I recalled the events of the morning. As I tiptoed slowly towards the kitchen, I couldn't help wondering if it couldn't be. She was leaning over the trash can cabinet, a new garbage bag in her grasp. She spun around and our eyes met. I'm just going to take out the trash, she said. I stared at her, my breath catching in my throat. Here she was, right in front of me, talking about trash as if it were the most casual thing in the world. In a feeble attempt to make her stay, I asked the only question I could think of. I asked it, even though I knew the answer already. What's in the bag, honey?